The sun hung low in the sky, casting an orange haze over the dense forest. The trees, towering and thick with vines, swayed slightly in the warm breeze, their leaves rustling with whispers of movement. Beneath them, the earth was alive. Crickets chirped, leaves crunched, and somewhere in the distance a lone bird let out a sharp cry. The wildlife sanctuary, an unsettling stretch of untouched land, was at once serene and unsettling. The forest, with its sprawling labyrinth of underbrush and shadows, was home to countless creatures. Yet in this stillness there was a lurking presence, a pulse that hummed just beneath the surface, a predator waiting, patient and cunning. Among the thick shadows of the trees, a cheetah moved like a whisper. Her coat, dotted with dark spots, blended seamlessly into the undergrowth, where the shifting light danced between branches. She moved with a grace that would make any observer pause. Each muscle in her body rippled under the surface, coiled and ready for action. For the cheetah, hunger was a constant companion, but it was not just hunger she chased. It was a thirst for mastery over the land, a longing to prove herself as the most skilled in her domain. Her eyes, sharp and focused, darted across the forest floor. Her senses were heightened, taking in the scent of the earth, the wind's direction, the rustle of the trees, and the pulse of life that surrounded her. Her prey, a young impala, was just ahead, visible only through the slats of sunlight that filtered through the canopy. The animal grazed in the open, unaware of the danger lurking nearby. The cheetah's muscles tensed as she lowered herself to the ground, blending perfectly with her surroundings, her breathing barely audible. In a world of silence, her movements were deliberate, methodical, and measured. She wasn't just hunting for food, she was hunting to prove that she was the apex predator in this world. Every inch of her body had been honed for this purpose. Her paws, soft but powerful, padded silently across the forest floor, so light that even the dry leaves made no sound under her weight. The young impala, distracted by the endless grass at its feet, gave no hint that it was in danger. It took another step forward, its body swaying in the breeze. The cheetah was nearly there. Suddenly, a strange sensation crept along her spine, a sensation of being watched. She paused. The breeze stopped for a moment, as if the entire forest had taken a collective breath. She narrowed her eyes, scanning the surroundings, but the thick forest hid all signs of movement. Yet something was off. The forest, which had once been so full of life, seemed unnervingly still. A feeling of unease began to settle in her chest. The hairs along her back stood up, not from fear, but from the growing realization that something else was out there, something she hadn't accounted for. A rustle in the bushes caught her attention. The cheetah froze. Her muscles tightened, coiled, ready to spring, but her instincts screamed at her to hold back. Something larger than the impala was approaching. Her heart raced in her chest, a beat faster than normal. A shadow moved through the trees, something tall, almost like a towering figure, a lion. The cheetah's stomach churned with unease. She was not afraid, but she was wary. The lion, a male with a mane that seemed to catch the very last rays of sunlight, emerged from the underbrush. His eyes gleamed with the same hunger the cheetah had felt earlier, but his gaze was fixed not on the impala, but on her. The young impala, unaware of the silent standoff unfolding, continued grazing. But for the cheetah, it was now a choice between the hunt and survival. She darted into the thick underbrush, her movements so swift and silent that the lion didn't even flinch. The cheetah's plan was clear: outsmart the lion. She was smaller, faster, and more agile. The lion, despite his strength, was slower. She took to the shadows, watching him carefully, her mind racing. She knew she couldn't allow the lion to get too close. She had one chance. Suddenly the impala looked up, its ears twitching. It caught the faintest scent, then bolted, sprinting into the dense forest with incredible speed. The cheetah's eyes flashed as she watched the impala flee, but her attention quickly shifted back to the lion, who had begun to stalk toward the now empty patch of grass. The lion, frustrated, turned his head slowly in her direction. Her heart pounded as she decided she had to act now. Without hesitation, she pushed off the ground with all her might, the wind rushing past her as she darted into the trees. She was a blur of spotted fur, every step calculated and precise. The lion, his gaze locked on her, began to give chase. He was fast, but the cheetah was faster. She knew the terrain better. She knew how to use the forest to her advantage, weaving through the trees, zigzagging with unpredictable movements. The lion struggled to keep up, his heavy body pushing through the underbrush with far less finesse. It wasn't long before the cheetah realized something else. The lion wasn't the only predator in the forest. The ground shook with the unmistakable thud of heavy footsteps. From the corner of her eye, she saw an even larger predator, a rogue elephant, charging through the trees. Its massive body swayed as it stormed toward them, trumpeting loudly, creating chaos in the air. The lion faltered, confused by the sudden disturbance. The cheetah, her pulse quickening with adrenaline, saw her chance. She was already heading in a different direction, her paws barely touching the ground. In a flash, she had crossed the clearing, darting through the undergrowth, and the lion, now distracted by the incoming elephant, hesitated long enough for the cheetah to escape into the depths of the forest. She came to a halt, hidden beneath a canopy of thick branches, and caught her breath. The forest was alive with the sounds of chaos. The lion retreating, the elephant trumpeting, and the distant rustle of leaves, stirred by a newfound presence. The cheetah watched the scene unfold, her heart still racing. The battle for survival was over, but there was a deeper realization sinking in. The forest, despite being her home, was far more dangerous than she had ever anticipated. Her strength, her speed, had almost not been enough. The world was unpredictable, and in the heart of the wilderness, the line between hunter and hunted was razor thin. As the forest calmed, the cheetah resumed her journey, no longer merely the hunter, but a survivor in a world where nothing was certain. And deep within the shadows, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the real hunt was just beginning. The cheetah's heart gradually slowed, but her mind remained alert, calculating, constantly weighing her next move. She crouched low in the brush, her body still tense, her senses wide open. The forest around her was eerily quiet now. The elephant's thunderous trumpets had faded, and the lion had retreated into the deeper woods, likely licking his pride's wounds. The stillness was a fleeting peace, one that wouldn't last long. She was not alone. Even now, in the sanctuary she called home, she was a part of an intricate web of life, one where every predator, every prey, and every creature in between had a role to play. The cheetah's instincts urged her to keep moving, to find cover, to stay hidden, but a curious tug pulled at her chest. She could feel it, the pulse of the forest, a rhythm that was both ancient and immediate. The scent of the impala lingered in the air, sharp and fresh. The cheetah's hunger returned with a rush, but she held back. The game had changed. She was no longer the one controlling the chase. The chase, in fact, was bigger than her now. And so was the price of survival. Without warning, the ground trembled again. This time much more subtly. It was not the heavy footsteps of the elephant, but something lighter, more agile. A rustle of branches in the distance signaled movement. She froze. The shadows between the trees lengthened, and the air seemed to thicken with each passing moment. This time, it wasn't the lion nor the elephant, but something else, something that had remained hidden in the undergrowth, watching, waiting. It was not an animal that the cheetah recognized, and her instincts flared with uncertainty. The wind shifted and the scent reached her nose, a scent both familiar and alien. There, just on the edge of her vision, something moved in the darkness of the trees. Her muscles tensed, but she held herself still, allowing only her keen eyes to betray the movement. It was another predator, but this one was far different from any she had encountered before. It was smaller than the lion, but faster, more nimble. The cheetah's mind raced. Could it be another cheetah? No, this one was different, more elusive, like a shadow rather than a body. She narrowed her gaze, and as the figure moved, it became clear. Leopard. But it wasn't the typical predator one would expect in this part of the sanctuary. The leopard moved with an eerie grace, almost too quiet for its size, and its gaze was locked on the cheetah's position, as though it knew exactly where she was. Her blood ran cold as the realization hit her. This was no accidental encounter. The leopard, with its sharp intelligence and cunning instincts, was hunting her. For the first time in her life, the cheetah felt a rush of fear, not because she was weaker or slower, but because this was not a fight she had prepared for. This was a battle of wits, and in this moment the cheetah knew she was not the only one who had learned to outwit her prey. The leopard circled, its body low to the ground, its movements swift and calculated. It wasn't rushing, like the lion or the elephant. No, the leopard was studying her, waiting for a moment of weakness, a slip in the cheetah's guard. For a long time, neither animal moved. The silence between them was deafening, thick with the weight of tension. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Then, just as the cheetah was preparing to bolt, a new sound emerged from behind her. A soft, eerie creaking of branches. Something much larger this time. The cheetah's muscles tensed again, but she didn't look back. She couldn't afford to lose focus on the leopard. But the presence behind her grew stronger, unmistakable. A figure emerged from the shadows, an enormous black panther, its sleek coat blending perfectly with the night, its eyes glowing like twin embers in the dimming light. The panther's gaze was fixed not on the cheetah, but on the leopard, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. The leopard, sensing the shift in power, stopped circling. Its eyes flickered from the cheetah to the panther. The three predators stood, locked in an unspoken standoff. The cheetah could feel the balance of power shift, her pulse quickening once more. The panther was formidable, larger and stronger than her, with an aura of dominance that would make even the leopard hesitate. The tension in the air was palpable, each predator reading the others, weighing the risks of engagement. The cheetah's heart pounded, but her mind stayed sharp. She could feel her breath quicken, but she didn't panic. She had always known that survival was about more than just speed. It was about reading the situation and adapting. And right now, the situation was clear. She wasn't just being hunted. She was witnessing an intricate power struggle in the heart of the forest. The leopard's eyes narrowed, its body tensing. But before either predator could make a move, the ground beneath them shifted again. A rumble. This one unmistakable, echoed through the trees. The forest groaned as something massive pushed its way through the undergrowth. The panther let out a low growl, its eyes flicking toward the disturbance. The leopard, perhaps realizing that its moment had passed, turned and slipped into the shadows. The cheetah, sensing the change, sprinted into the darkness, her paws pounding against the earth, but this time not to escape a single foe. This was the forest in motion, a living, breathing entity with its own rules, its own hunger. And as she ran, she realized that survival wasn't just about being the fastest. It was about knowing when to strike, when to hide, and when to simply step aside. For the true predator in this world wasn't the lion or the cheetah or even the panther. No, it was the forest itself, ever-changing, unpredictable, and forever in motion. The cheetah paused only when the noise faded and the eerie calm returned. But she would never forget this night. The hunt wasn't over. And perhaps, for her, it never truly would be. As the quiet of the night slowly enveloped the forest once more, the cheetah slowed her pace, her instinct still tingling with a mixture of caution and readiness. She hadn't yet reached the safety of her den, but the unease had not left her. The disturbance, whatever it had been, was not something she could shake off easily. Something deep in her bones told her that it was only a matter of time before the balance would shift again, before the predators would resume their silent, ceaseless dance. The forest around her felt different now. The air was thick with tension, the scent of her surroundings sharper than before. Each rustle in the trees, every shifting shadow, made her heart race once again. Her paws, though light and fast, seemed to sink into the ground more than they ever had, as if the earth itself was warning her of the dangers that lurked beneath its surface. She moved with quiet purpose, her sharp eyes scanning every inch of her surroundings, alert for any sign of danger. Her breath came steady, though her pulse betrayed the anxiety that had taken root inside her. The sounds of the forest, usually so familiar and soothing, now seemed laden with an almost unnatural intensity. Just as she thought she had found some semblance of calm, an unmistakable sound reached her ears. The snap of a twig. The cheetah froze, her ears flicking toward the sound. She crouched low to the ground, every muscle in her body primed for action. But the noise didn't come again, and the forest held its breath once more. She dared not move. Her body was a shadow in the underbrush, her fur blending into the night as she waited, patient as a stone. The moment passed. There was nothing but the hum of the forest around her. She exhaled slowly, allowing herself to relax, but only slightly. And then it happened. From the corner of her eye, she saw it. A flash of movement. It was fast, impossibly fast, a blur of dark fur weaving through the trees. It was the leopard again. But it wasn't alone. The cheetah's pulse skipped. The shadows shifted, and behind the leopard another figure emerged. Something massive, something that seemed to breathe the very darkness around it. A figure that was too large to be just another predator, too silent to be a threat in the usual sense. It was the panther, moving with unnatural grace, its eyes fixed on the cheetah, the gleam of its gaze unmistakable. The cheetah felt a rush of adrenaline, a primal instinct surging through her veins. The hunt was on, but this time the stakes were different. The panther wasn't simply hunting her. It was leading her into a trap. The leopard moved first, its muscles coiled and ready as it prowled toward the cheetah. But the panther stayed still, watching, waiting. The cheetah's instinct screamed at her to run, to escape, but she knew that the moment she turned her back, the trap would spring. She couldn't afford to be outmaneuvered again. The forest was silent except for the distant rumble of thunder, an omen perhaps. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of rain, and the sounds of the forest began to fade. The usual hum of insects and rustle of smaller creatures had stopped completely, as if they too knew something was about to happen. The leopard crouched, its eyes narrowing, and with one swift leap it lunged forward, but the cheetah was faster, her body reacting before her mind could process the danger. She darted to the side, a blur of gold and black, narrowly avoiding the leopard's grasp. But as she turned, she realized that the panther had already moved. Closer, too close. The panther's presence loomed behind her like a storm waiting to break. She turned once more, moving faster than she ever had before, her powerful legs propelling her through the dense underbrush, the sound of her own heartbeat in her ears. She could hear the panther's breath now, steady and deliberate, as it followed, unpatient, unrelenting. The cheetah's mind raced. She knew the forest better than any creature, knew the pathways and the hidden spots. She needed to think fast. Her only chance was to lead them into an area where the trees were dense, where her speed and agility could outpace their brute strength. But the panther was no fool. It had been hunting in this terrain far longer than she had. The chase grew more desperate. The air was alive with the sound of her paws hitting the ground, the low growl of the panther behind her, and the occasional rustle of the leopard weaving through the underbrush. The cheetah knew she was losing ground, and that realization fueled her desperation. She could hear the panther's breathing grow louder, its presence now a palpable force that threatened to crush her. And Han. Just as the panther's shadow loomed too close, a strange sound cut through the chase, the unmistakable crack of a branch snapping under heavy weight. The ground shook slightly, and the sound was followed by a loud, guttural growl. The cheetah's eyes widened in disbelief. The lion. It appeared suddenly, almost out of nowhere, its massive frame filling the space between the cheetah and the panther. The panther skidded to a halt, its ears flattened as it assessed the new threat. The leopard, ever the opportunist, hesitated, its eyes flicking between the cheetah and the lion. In that split second, the cheetah made her move. She darted through the trees, her body a blur of speed and precision, leaving both the panther and the leopard confused by the sudden turn of events. She didn't dare look back. She couldn't afford to. The chase was no longer a game. It was a fight for survival, and in the tangled heart of the forest, the rules were written in blood. The cheetah kept running, pushing herself harder than she ever had before. She felt the weight of her own exhaustion, but the fear of being caught, of losing to the jungle's harshest predators, pushed her forward.